Welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today in the show, we have Poonam Marai. She is an internal medicine physician and geriatrician. She wrote the Kevin MD piece, "There is no other body part that has filled me with such a roller coaster of emotion." Poonam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Kevin. Just really grateful for your platform and for you giving me the chance to talk about this poem.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and we'll get into that a little bit. But first off, can you share your story and journey to where you are today?
Yeah, so, I grew up in the Chicagoland area. My father was a family practice physician over in one of the suburbs of Chicago. And as a kid, we would be at his office, my siblings and I, we would be filing papers and it would be patient after patient that would leave his office that would look at me and say, we're so grateful to have your dad. You're so lucky to have him as a dad. And over time, I just came to admire him, and I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a physician. Fast forward to undergrad, where I was in this 8-year straight medical program, and I was like, you know what? If I'm going to med school, let me study something outside of the biology and chemistry. And so I actually became a philosophy major and really became interested in end of life, death, and even got a chance to go to India and study Buddhism and actually study Tibetan medicine. And so I'm, coming back, went to medical school and then started my intern year at the University of Chicago. And I just had some amazing mentors. And having had patients that were older, I realized, this is what I want to be doing in medicine. I want to be advocating for these patients and just, the aging process, death and dying. I want to be talking about this with my patients. And so I pursued a geriatrics fellowship at the University of Chicago and then went on to an academic institution, which was great. I think it had its place in my life. But during that time, I had 2 kids, became a physician mom, and trying to balance it all was very difficult. And then COVID hit, became even more difficult. And I wanted to be on the front lines, but at the same time, my children needed me and all our caregivers. I was afraid to use grandparents and other people. We just didn't know a lot at the beginning of the pandemic. And so yeah, I said, you know what, I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause in my life. I left clinical medicine and I said, what do I want? Kevin, I hadn't asked myself that question in a very, very long time. And when I did, what came up was, I want time with patients. What I love about medicine is my time with patients. Where can I get that in the medical field, in the medical system? And that led me to concierge medicine. I joined a practice known as Harper Health in Chicago, and it is everything that I thought medicine would be. It's so much of, as I reflect on my dad's practice many, many years ago, it has so many similar qualities to that practice. I get time with patients. I have amazing colleagues, but I also get to work on myself as a human being, as a mother, as a physician, my physical and mental health. And so I just feel so blessed to have had all those other parts in my life. I needed that to get here, but I feel like I'm able to flourish in my current position. Yeah, so that's kind of where my journey and how I arrived here.
What does that say about our current medical system that some physicians have to go to concierge practices and specialty practices in order to get that satisfaction and proverbial work-life balance that you just described?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's a sad state of our medical system. I think that the medical system exists to kind of help as many people as possible. But, I think physicians and patients are really seeking something different out of this relationship. And I think more and more people are talking about it and more people are making that decision. I think we're at a point where we've had this great resignation in medicine. And I think all of us are just trying to find that sweet spot of, loving our jobs, but also loving ourselves and loving all the other parts of ourselves that exist beyond our physician role.
All right, let's transition into the Kevin MD piece that you wrote. It's titled, "There is no other body part that has filled me with such a roller coaster of emotion." Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your piece, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Yeah. So, it's a poem. It's a poem about a person's journey through, a female's journey of having breasts, being a child, basically ignoring the fact that there's this body part on you, to then kind of aging with breasts. And so for me personally, the journey was very relevant. I grew up in a Southeast Asian family. We didn't really talk about breasts. I had, we just kind of something I just kept to myself, didn't really talk with family or friends about it. It wasn't until I had my own children and kind of went through the breastfeeding journey as a physician mom, where I actually started feeling pride in that part of my body because it was sustaining my children. But at the same time of having that pride, it was such a source of anxiety to be a physician mom trying to pump. I remember there was a time I was pumping on the floor of a skilled nursing facility. It was a bathroom floor, just crying because I wanted to do this thing for my children, but there was just no time, no place. I remember, trying to find, what breast pump would allow me to even wear them portably, go into a patient room, still allow me to function as a doctor and as a mother. And then what really prompted this piece was, in my concierge practice, having made the diagnosis of breast cancer, I had drawn a Galleri test on a patient. It's a multi-cancer early detection blood test. It was a patient that was in between mammograms. There was really no reason for her to have the breast cancer, but she was in her 70s. We decided to draw the Galleri test, and it was positive for breast cancer. And I remember, picking up the phone, about to make that phone call, which a lot of primary care doctors have to do. We're the ones that are breaking this bad news. And I remember, because I have this relationship with her in this concierge practice, I've gotten to know her. I've gotten to know her family. I knew it was going to be a really, really hard conversation. And I realized that it's going to be hard for her, but it's hard for me. And I don't think in my career I had ever acknowledged that it was tough on me to have these tough, and difficult conversations with the patients. And so I remember having that conversation with her, and then going home, also reflecting on the multiple family members that I've had that have also had breast cancer in their late 30s, so young. And I remember just sitting on the rug of my home and writing this poem, and it just flowed. I think I was able to kind of get out of my head, which is what we oftentimes do as physicians. It's how we are successful. We operate at this intellectual level, but it was getting out of my head, going down to my body and saying, how do you feel? How are you going to process this? And the poem was the outcome.
So why a poem versus, say, a narrative? So what made you choose this form to really express your thoughts and feelings about this?
Yeah, it started off almost free form, but it was almost like there were these stages. There was the childhood stage. There was the teenage stage where it's like society wants me to view breasts one way versus, I want to view them a different way. Then there was the mother phase. Then, there was, the medical phase where there's breast cancer. And then kind of the stage that I meet patients in, the geriatric phase, where, I've had patients who have named their breasts, who will talk about how they love to be free at home, just not in a bra. Like, having those conversations with patients brings me closer to them. And for some reason, going through each of the stages, it kind of flowed out as a poem. It didn't flow out as, a blog post. It didn't flow out. It was a poem. And I'll tell you, I don't write a lot of poetry. I love to write free form, but not necessarily poems, but this is how it came out.
After someone reads your poem, what are some misconceptions? What are some things that you want to clear up? What are some of the things that you want them to come away with?
Yeah. I think from the healthcare provider standpoint, as providers across the whole spectrum, from pediatricians to geriatricians, we deal with this anatomical part of the body, right? Pediatricians are helping children through, the growing phases of breasts, and then teenagers. And then as geriatricians, we are talking about perceptions of breast with our older patients. And so, if one has the luxury of time to really ask our patients about that, this is part of their healthcare journey, is dealing with the emotions that come with that body part. And just for, I think, patients, for them to be able to have that conversation with their provider, to feel safe, that if this is a body part that's brought them pride, whether it's breast augmentation or that's brought them fear through a breast cancer diagnosis, to, the sense of detachment that I see with a lot of my older patients, just to have that conversation. I think just talking about it allows us to open up about it. And so to create that open space.
So when you have these conversations with your older patients about breasts, what's their reaction? Or are they surprised, or Are they wondering why there's so much conversation about that body part? What's in general? What are some of the reactions when you start talking more in depth about this?
Yeah, I'll tell you, their body language changes. They go from tense to just almost like taking a sigh of relief. It's almost like that invitation has allowed them now to finally maybe talk about something that they've maybe wanted to talk about for a while. No one's really asked them about it. This is not something they maybe freely talk to with family members. And there's other patients that will skirt right through the topic and move on to something else. So I think it just gives them an opportunity to just release and say what they need to say. And I'll tell you, I think I've laughed more about breast in those conversations than I have in a long time. And so, yeah, it just opens a door.
What are some of the sample questions that you ask in the exam room that approaches this topic?
Yeah. So if they've had a breast cancer diagnosis, I'll often say, these have probably been friends and foes your entire life. Tell me more about that journey. And it's usually something related to their journey. For patients that may not have had breast cancer, I like to say, I like to be open about all parts of our body. I'd love to know more about, your journey with your breast. And so, in that sense, I'll kind of just open up the question, and they'll either be very brief about it or have some great stories about it.
We're talking to Poonam Marai. She is an internal medicine physician and geriatrician. She wrote to Kevin MD Peace, "There is no other body part that has filled me with such a roller coaster of emotion." Poonam, I don't have very many geriatricians on the show, so tell me some of the rewards and challenges of the field.
Well, I'll tell you, I think, the rewards is that patients that are older, they have so much love to give. They love to have time with their providers. They love the relationship. I think that's what they grew up, or kind of, that's what they kind of value in the medical system, is time with their providers. And it's so wonderful as a geriatrician to have that space to be able to form that relationship. Some of the challenges is oftentimes helping the healthcare system see the value in our older patients. So much of what I do is advocating for older patients within the system. And sometimes I feel this great desire to help trainees and to help colleagues and specialists to kind of open their minds to see that an age is not, it is just a number. Patients can be 80-year-old and robust, or 80-year-old and frail, and so to look beyond just that number and see the patient behind that. And it's such a rewarding experience because of that.
And my final question: what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Kevin, that the poem was important, but I think the poem was really a metaphor for me to express myself. Having been at the brink of burnout as a physician mom, expressing myself has kind of been what has kept me sane through my journey as a physician. And I hope that, every clinician is able to pause, maybe not, as long as I did, but at least is able to pause and reflect on, where do they want their life and their career to be, and then to manifest, to put it out in the world and work towards that. We have to build our careers as physicians, and it would be lovely to be able to do that our way. And so to be very intentional to create that space in our lives, in our busy, busy lives, to figure out, what do we want? It starts with that simple question: what do we want as physicians, as human beings, as mothers, fathers, etc.? What do we want to get out of our careers and our lives?
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.